Thank you very much, Jennifer. We've had some great conversations about challenges and real possibilities through digital curation, through archiving platforms and Indigenous needs for platforms that work for them. So I want to go on and talk about some work I've been doing with the McLeod Lake Indian Band. They're neighbors to the Daneza. That was part of a traditional land use study and built in digital archiving into the development-related project. It's one way to fund this. It was hard to get funding for these community-oriented projects, so this was a research project that drew information, 15 years worth of oral history work. It was our background research, and we needed a way to make it accessible to the community, not just have it summarized in a report. So what we started doing was looking for a content management platform that was designed for Indigenous use. And we looked at a number of places and chose the Mookato platform, which Kim Kristen developed with an Australian group in Northern Australia. The big thing that it had is built-in cultural protocols for managing particular rights, each particular stakeholder rights to any piece of material. It also talked about having mobile apps where you could go out into the field, document things, it would automatically upload. It has these traditional knowledge licenses attached to it that are licenses and labels that she developed along with Jane Anderson. And they're actually have gone through like the WIPO process of accreditation. So they're sort of along the lines of a Creative Commons license. But in terms of repatriation, this is an example of a repatriation-oriented Indigenous database system, and I call it repatriation-oriented in that as opposed to First Nations-oriented, in that the materials are actually housed in an outside institution and digital access is given to them in the community. And because they're open to the public most often, because of the mandates of the institution, to have all their collections available to everyone. That's where you need the licenses to protect particular stakeholders and cultures and customs. So it seemed like a good fit. We wanted to try it out. We created the Sekani Community Archive using their platform. It's a Drupal-based open source platform. And started using it. And we uploaded hundreds of hours of audio and got the community starting to engage with it. And this is a woman listening to a relative of hers tell a story in 1968 about traveling across the Rocky Mountains in 1911. So it's in his own language. Also, so she was very happy to listen to this and help them see the value of engaging with technology in this way. We brought it to her living room, and she's looking at it on her own computer in her own living room. This is just an example of their sort of standard metadata. The one you probably can't see too well. Let's see if I can make it bigger. The one category they have that's nice addition is the traditional knowledge category. It's almost like a wiki feature where people can add their own knowledge to the record. So the other repatriation-oriented digital curation tool is the Reciprocal Research Network. So I've talked about Mookato, it's open source, Dublin Core. One of the drawbacks about that was that the protocols assume a relatively fixed and hierarchical social organization, like they have in Australia, where only women are to see certain materials, only men are to see other materials. People from particular kinship groups have rights to some materials. It's very hierarchically arranged and works quite well for a hierarchical digital content management system, and that's how they designed the system around that. But the communities that I'm working with are Athabascan groups, northern hunters with non-hierarchical systems. They trace lineage bilaterally, and they really value personal knowledge and experience as an asset to, that should be attached to someone's rights to an object, as opposed to kinship or other forms of tracing heritage. The Reciprocal Research Network is another example of, similar to Mookato, it was developed a collaborative project. I really won't go into the details of it here. It doesn't have the built-in cultural protocol features. And then, so we started looking at other platforms that we could use. There in British Columbia, there's a lot of land referral tracking content management systems for First Nations to use to track developments in their traditional territories, and to help them assess their heritage values, which helps them assert their Aboriginal and treaty rights to their lands. And these are required as part of environmental impact assessments, and First Nations are inundated with these developments. So consultants doing these studies started designing these systems to manage the data and to help do direct to digital mapping, which I sort of referred to the other day with using Google Earth tools and similar GIS tools for where you can capture your map as part of your interview process, and you don't have to have another stage and where you're digitizing dots that you've put on a map that relate to your catalog, to your interview, where someone talks about the spot where they hunted salmon or shot a moose or thought about shooting a moose or those things. So Stolo Connect was one example. Lewis Heritage is another example. Community Knowledge Keeper is another example. Signals for First Nations Governance is another one by Three Pikas Heritage Consulting. Truvian Labs was another, and Trail Mark Systems. We did demos and actually entered some sort of, we developed just like one audio, one video, one text record kind of thing to throw into the system and see how it dealt with it, see how whether we liked what it did with it or not. I will just go back there. We'll go backwards, do it, yes. So you can see, oops, actually, I'll do that. There are these two sort of different types of content management systems out there, and ideally, we wanted one that built in features of both. An archival platform that museums and archives have with metadata standards so that descriptive information doesn't get lost, basic metadata doesn't get lost with the materials, but also something that was really tied to the land, mapping for the communities. There's many needs for the mapping feature. I think it's limited in how it's often used, but it's the standard way that people do these traditional land use studies. And you don't have to use it in the way that it's been used in the past either. I think there's new methodologies for using it. So as part of looking towards sustainable digital curation systems that they can use for their own governance, and this really doesn't blow up well, so I'll make it smaller. I tried to come up with a one sheet. We did brainstorming, and this group of a core group of people at McLeod Lake did these demos. We did them together, and we started realizing in order to get chief and council to really understand what we're talking about, in order to get the lands department understanding, in order to get community understanding, we needed a one-page handout that said it all. And this, unfortunately, you can't see the one-page handout that said it all so well. But the idea is you have a secondary community archive in the center. You have, it can be fed. It's a secure database. We researched a bunch of different tools for encrypted file sharing and storage systems. And sync.com is one that's stores all their data in Canada, which is a requirement for most federally funded projects in Canada. And it's a lot of the, like Amazon cloud storage, it's all on servers in the US and it's not encrypted, it's not that well protected. So anyways, we did a bunch of research into really digitally secure systems. And so where they could store their existing collections and potential new collections. And then they would use them for these traditional land referral, land use studies. They can also use them for language and culture development, for family histories, for the sky's the limit, as we have seen through all of these applications of what you can do with heritage materials. And that was sort of the idea, and that's about where we're at right now, but let's see if I can zoom out. Not really. Oh, well, I was going to show you that the two different systems, the repatriation-oriented models plus the First Nations more oriented models are what we're hoping to draw together for the First Nations group. Oops. So challenges to this whole process along the way has been finding people who really will stick with the training and really want to go keep up with the training, but also funding is, I've put it at the bottom, but it really should be at the top. The lack of core funding. From my perspective, every First Nations community should have a tribal librarian or archivist as a core position, just as they have chief and council funding and other core funding. You know, the history of institutional discrimination and cycles of abuse limits people's ability to engage with the material. They often trigger painful memories for people as they engage with old material. You never know what will come up. So being sensitive to that, offering resources, making sure that they're there for the person who's working with the material in the process, that the band knows that they need to support the healing aspect, and there can be very healing aspects of the engagement also, but it often also can trigger some trauma. And then trouble finding professional support is another challenge. So future needs of First Nations governance tools, I think because of recent developments with the court cases that are saying, yes, we recognize that Aboriginal people do have rights in Canada, and you can manage your own land, but then how do we can't just plot people in without support in managing the land. And so I hope that we've learned from NAGPRA, probably a lot of you might know that's the Native American Graves Repatriation Protection Act from 1990, and similar legislation that followed in Canada that called for the return of materials in outside collections to First Nations communities, but often it didn't have a process for it or funding, and that's another session could be talked about. And that's basically what I wanted to share. I think I wanted to go back to my first slide, actually, to talk about, this is sort of within the whole contested spaces for song making and protocols for innovating tradition. Sorry, I'm doing it a backwards way. I'm going backwards. And the first slide, I have two waveforms there. And the first one is the waveform from a recording of Alberta Ascoti singing the Gayan's Chicken Song in 1994, so not that long ago. The second one is his step-grandson's recomposition, he calls it, of that song in 2008 that he included in a album he released on iTunes. And you can see there's a lot more going on in that second recording. You can just see that there's more sound, there's more. So he has done some sort of mashup he started doing mashups, and then the community really didn't like that. They felt if he was going to work with the songs, he needed to keep it the way the Dreamers brought it down, and that he could work with them but not cut them, not segment the song so it was fragmented. So this one is an example of one that does have that original song in there, but it's got Western, studio recording music all around it. And you wouldn't, until you get halfway through the song, you wouldn't even know that it's Aboriginal. It's inspired by an Aboriginal Dreamer song. So it's just one example of how communities are engaging with archival materials, ideas that are coming out of that, interactions that are coming out of that, and where they're at now.